as Dave will sometimes, not break news on his message boards, but he will often say things on there that you might not get him saying on an actual radio show or in a newsletter. You do sometimes get some prime Dave over on that message board, and yeah, this weekend wasn't an exception. As yet, we did get on the Observer message board. I don't know, incendiary post from Big Dave, replying to somebody saying, "Do you know why they didn't advertise Punk versus Moxley longer, and why it had a short build? Because Punk agreed to it. Then AEW got a legal letter saying he wasn't down with doing it, and they didn't know if he'd come until Tony put his foot down." Dave went on to say, "There's lots of nice things you can say about him, but you can absolutely argue his position on Moxley was correct," which I will make that argument, but you can't argue he willingly did what he was asked in that scenario. So that was controversy one, JP. That was enough. Like, I say I'll defend CM Punk in a minute. I was like, fucking hell, Punk didn't want to lose to Moxley, so he got the lawyers involved. Like, how my hero has fallen. He is like that. I believe that. He just literally, since the Cabana thing, anything goes wrong in his life, he's got the lawyer on speed dial, hasn't he? And I was like, oh, if I was Tony Khan, I'm not sure I'd necessarily want to deal with this man going forward. And just when you thought that was bad enough, and I didn't believe this at first, JP, but an Instagram story was posted by CM Punk that I'm sure everybody in the chat and watching this later has seen by now, where Punk replied. I said on the Daily Update, JP, I didn't believe this was real when I first saw it, because I am a loser who has notifications on CM Punk stories on Instagram and posts, because you never know what he's going to come out with. Case in point, but he posted it and deleted it so quick that I didn't even get a notification for it, so I missed it. But it did turn out to be real, even if he very quickly deleted it. And yeah, as he's said there with a capital letters sigh, he wasn't cleared to come back to wrestle yet. Then the plan was to wrestle at the pay-per-view. I sat and listened to Moxley's Rocky 3 idea and explained how I'd never seen a Rocky movie. We'll get to that. I thought the idea sucked, but if the boss wanted to do it, whatever. He said he wouldn't lose to me. I've never experienced someone refusing to lose to me. I don't know. Loki might disagree, but we'll see. I just laughed. I asked Tony if this was what he wanted. He said yes, he's the boss. So I said okay, but I'd need to be cleared first. They kept saying it could just be a squash, so I didn't need to be cleared. I scoffed at that, says CM Punk. My health is more important. And the best bit, JP, Dave Meltzer is a liar. Jericho is a liar. And a stooge. There were plans, but plans always change. But I'll never put a company above my health again. Called it the Instabomb on the Daily Update last night, JP. But at what point did you see this today, or did you see it last night as this was all breaking? Were you tucked up in bed? Because
I was tucked up in bed, being made to watch series 15 of Criminal Minds going on over here. Season 15. It's 160 hours of that fucking show. So I saw this stuff this morning, basically. And I mean, for this, I think it was one of our patrons, Shaz, in the replies to this, is really the best description.
One of the 2%. Hi, Shaz.
He's a messy bitch.
Yeah.
And there's any other way to describe him. He's a messy bitch.
That is Punk.
Love him or hate him about it. However, like, there are things when he explains, it's the way he deals with issues tends to be wrong. His fundamental points at times are actually quite right. And the idea, I think, was, there's been some pushback on this, and Moxley was willing to lose at the paper. That wasn't the issue. It's just that he kind of wanted to win this one in Clubber Lang fashion, basically. Like, knock him out for the Rocky 3 stuff, which you think he goes on about fucking Slapshot and the rest of it. I mean, surely at some stage, like, he might have attempted to watch it. He didn't do anything for the guts of 7 years. Not at one point in time he thought, all right, I'll watch Rocky just to get it out of the way. No?
He's consistent, though. He's tweeted a lot of times about how he hasn't seen the Rocky movies.
Yes, he is.
We've all got our gaps, JP. There's always,
we do.
Blue Velvet for me, for example. There's always not that I'm equating it with Rocky, but understandable.
But in terms of the overall issue, I mean, it's really it's kind of funny, because the more I see of this, the more I think he's coming back. Like, he is
really. Oh, that's interesting.
And that he is, like, I I just think there is an element of the kind of push comes to shove, and we talk about Dynamite as well, because there was a thing that they did that everyone talked about, the truck and everything else, and I was like, you didn't need to film there. You're doing that for like a specific it feels like you're doing this for you're protesting too much. Oh, we've got to block him out. It's like, no, just move the camera like 45 degrees the other way and film from that angle where you haven't got a big picture of CM Punk on there. So I'm kind of think he would that he is going to come back on it. In terms of Jericho being a stooge, yeah, he's not fucking wrong about that, is he? He's completely spot on. I was half expecting when reading the Observer today to read, I am not a liar, and Chris Jericho is loved, if not beloved, within the AEW locker room. In exchange,
P.S. Listen to Judas, Sound of the Summer.
It is
revolutionized
the wrestling business.
Instead, Dave just literally didn't like barely acknowledge it in the Observer today. Like, I was so disappointed. I was expecting, we're expecting a Fightful update on Punk tonight. So chat, do your business. Let us know if that comes through at any point while we're recording. Maybe we'll end up having to tag it on at the end if there's anything major. But I mean, I want to believe what you're selling, JP. I take it the opposite way, that he's never fucking coming back now. And this comes 24 hours after. If you'd have asked me, I would have been in your camp, because there were little murmurings coming out that, from Dax Harwood and, Punk's camp, quote unquote, that he does want to come back. And he probably does. But that goes to your earlier point. He just can't help but be CM Punk. He learns no lessons. There's always a gripe, and there's always like an explosion. And it's like, even down to the detail of, we all know Jericho was a Meltzer stooge. We all know he feeds stories. Remember the MVP fight story? And it was like, needless to say, I had the last laugh. It was so obvious that Big Dave we'd gotten that report from Jericho's side. Like, yes, but is this not like the Hangman and Colt Cabana thing, or the Bucks and Colt Cabana thing, where Punk just decided they were the ones, spreading that story when, a lot of people have kind of worked out that, Colt Cabana's disappeared when Punk came back. I don't think he necessarily needed Hangman in the Bucks. He talks first, he asks questions later. Like, that's what Punk does. And I think the biggest story here, JP, honestly, is that, I think for Punk, he's really just, I don't think he's realized how much of an issue he's causing here, because he is accusing AEW of forcing him to go to the ring, or wanting him to go to the ring, I should say, when he's injured. That's the headline here for me. He's alleging that no, it wasn't that I didn't want to lose to Moxley, which we'll see, or I didn't want to lose to Moxley, even though he makes sure to get in there. He thinks the idea was fucking stupid, which, by the way, it was, and it was proven at the time, because it did not help pay-per-view buyers one bit. It didn't help interest in the show one bit. It was fucking stupid, and it didn't even bleed into the match, because they then just went out there and had a normal match. There wasn't even I was Punk gonna last, a full match with Moxley. They just went out there and worked a fucking match. It was a terrible idea, but despite the fact that he's right there, the injury stuff is the interesting bit here, because he's he's saying here that they were trying to have me go in there, wrestle injured, and I'm never doing that again. You could easily get the lawyers involved here. That does explain why lawyers might have got involved. That's a major allegation. Really, that doesn't make Moxley look good, and I'm sure Moxley's got his own side of the story, which is probably after, in the face of all the Hangman stuff, he was trying to knock Punk down a peg, and he was probably like, well, I'll lose to you if you lose to me, kid, type of thing. That's the way I read between the lines here. But he's throwing Moxley under the bus, he's throwing Tony Khan under the bus, and he's throwing AEW under the bus. So if he wants to come back, as much as I want to see it, especially with him being he is such a messy bitch, and I love him for being such a messy bitch, and I'd kill for him to come back. But I go the opposite way, JP. I think this makes it even
a bit more difficult.
Mm.
If only it wasn't wrestling. In which case, I still have that belief, and I always have done, in the back of all of this, of just thinking they're leaving a lot on the table here for this. And it was interesting. And it was interesting listening to Dave Meltzer talk about this today, actually, when he was saying about, do you bring him back? And he was obviously being quite circumspect, given the stuff that Punk had said about him. But it was it was a case of him saying, do you bring him back if you're in desperate straits, rather than bringing him back, when you're, as a company, you're kind of relatively stable. In terms of the injury thing, it would be interesting to see, why would he even be he could have them over a barrel if they made him work. And as we know, he will go to court over this stuff. Like, you know, he has previous
a
on this.
moment's notice these days.
So I'm surprised that wasn't necessarily the case. Like he could have not wrestled. Like that would have been something that would have been possible. And like I said, it was a daft fucking idea at the time. It was like, what? Giving it away on free TV. And, you know, and the idea of that's the reason why it was a squash match, effectively, is because of his injury. And I
remember us suggesting that at the time. We did kind of wonder if that was the case.
That this would be. And then, like you say, he goes out, works a normal match. And then before you know it, he's out, you know, then we have Brawl out and then he's injured. Like it's a hell of a, like, you know, you just can't guess the direction of what this guy is going to go in. It's the fact he keeps on commenting about this stuff and about wrestling, and he's keeping himself very much out there as well. Do I think you need him? I think there's that part of me thinks he's box office. He is I often thought this with MJF. MJF does not add the edge to AEW. CM Punk does. That's genuine unpredictability. When he's got a mic in the hand, even when he's in the ring now. And I don't think that's kind of an intangible in wrestling TV terms. So that's why I always think that there's the dollar and cents argument of he can see the potential of the stuff that you could do with him. But unless CM Punk sees that potential as well, it's kind of like a golden goose, isn't it? You're better off just having him come in a couple of times a year, wrestle a match, be really specific in the angle, and just go, right, fuck off, Phil. Don't stay around backstage. Because he is who he is.
That was my reaction, like, when we didn't have this side of the story, which, you know, does, you know, again, the question's going to be whether the health issue thing is true or not, like, or whether, you know, I've seen it said, I think Punk believes it's true, so, you know, I suppose that's the same thing to CM Punk, but, you know, there is that kind of element of it. It depends on that. But when that first post from Meltzer came out, that was enough for me. If I was Tony Khan and, like, I'm trying to book a finish to a match and CM Punk is getting the lawyers involved, I'd just be like, you know what, I'm done. And I love CM Punk, and I, as a fan, don't want that to happen. But if I'm a boss, of course, you're just like, why would you continue to indulge this crazy man? I'm worse than that, JP. Put your world title on him a few weeks later.
Yeah,
like, there's some red flags here.
You can't do that anymore. I don't think you can do that at all. I think the only way he works really when if he came back, the only way I think you could kind of get away with it is if with him as a pure special attraction that comes in and has that big match midway through a pay-per-view, basically. And that is the kind of thing that it is. And it's very specific angles and whatnot. But you are at a point where you're thinking, who's going to want to work with him? However, like, is it money? Is that the thing that they, like, it does come down to the idea.
J-Pop mentions it in the chat, JP, and something I've wondered and heard. You know, when he talks about, you know, trying to run a company here, all of that stuff, does Punk have a percentage in the company? Is there more financial
secret EVP?
Could be. Jericho basically is, isn't he? He's an EVP and everything but title.
Could you imagine that? CM Punk coming back as an authority figure in wrestling. Like, you just think, like, part of him has died, really, in the process of that, isn't it? He just, like, he could have... But
makes a living over doing things. He becomes the villain he described, you know, other people as in the past. He's that guy, isn't he? When when he's fighting against the system and then he becomes the system. It's that age-old story, isn't it? You know, Rock's a part-timer. Oh wait, being a part-timer is actually not that bad. You know, he's that guy, and that's what he is. He's a hypocrite. He's always been that way, but he believes what he says. That's why we love him. Like James has been saying on the on Twitter, like, he is just. You know, this is why we love CM Punk. I almost want wrestling to be more full of more people like CM Punk who, you know, kick off about the fact that he's losing a match in a fashion he thinks stupid, or, you know, fights his own battles and fights his own corner. I almost think wrestling overall would be better for it. If I'm just being a grown up, would AEW be better if I'm in Tony Khan's position? You know, they got a nice locker room there that felt like it got upset when Punk came through, and he's left again, and it seems like a calm down, nice locker room again, or at least that's the stories. You know, C. Irvine / Chris I is putting in the Observer. That's kind of where Dave was coming from in the argument on his message board. That is it worth the upset to bring him back is the question if you're Tony Khan.
I mean, according to Sean Ross Sapp, because he has updated it on Fightful Select, like,
okay,
He's
Any
done
new details?
a while on here. I don't think there's anything in terms of new details other than stating the obvious of Moxley and Punk have heat. And I think that's a much more difficult sale because it's very easy to frame the Bucks and Kenny as not kind of getting it at times. I don't think you can really say that about Moxley.
Yeah.
And this is the guy who kind of lives and breathes it. And even though he is coming after CM Punk, it's not that far after. I mean, he came after it like in a kind of much more like kind of a weaker indie scene, if anything else, and has kind of like worked himself to those heights. It just says on here, what was it? They have had some contact. That's AEW and CM Punk.
Right. Okay.
That some close to Punk claim that he and Tony Khan have spoken, had a couple of meetings. There was a planned meeting for mid-February, and that got delayed because of Jerry Jarrett's funeral. I don't know why that would interrupt it for an entire month, but there we go. He said that Punk was originally considering the potential legal action there. Does remain under contract, but it says several people said that Punk has expressed some form of regret for aspect of that night in general.
Okay.
In there as well. At one point, those close to Punk believed he wanted out of his contract without a no-compete attached. However, they believed that Punk was open to returning to AEW and even wanted to. And that he was willing to apologize for the scrum portion of the all-out evening. That's what he's willing to apologize for, not the punch-up.
Okay.
That's not so much there. Injury-wise, he's been filming Heels season 2, so like I think he's all right on that. In terms of Hangman, that there's like, what was it? The Page makes an effort to remove himself from this situation, has tried to move past it, and was it the true accounts of Brawl Out will never quite be there. Those in New Japan weren't aware that he was going to turn up at Battle in the Valley on there as well.
Explains why he's in the stands.
Yeah, but he went there with like Lars Frederiksen and Lou D'Angeli. Sign Guy Dudley appears to be a fucking proper mover and shaker within the wrestling business. But there we go, in there as well. But this isn't CM Punk apparently saying it because they did reach out to him. They haven't heard anything necessarily back. So that's the kind of latest on that one.
Interesting. It does. I mean, the Moxley stuff doesn't shock me. Like, I mean, you could tell before Brawl Out at the presser. Like Punk was kind of half complimentary on Moxley, but in like a he pulled his punches kind of way. Like he didn't. You could tell something wasn't right there, and you can tell with. I mean, Moxley, wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he? Like I think it's it's come out before that he's not necessarily the biggest fan of Punk, so it doesn't surprise me. There's a bust up there. Like I say, that's how I read the Moxley angle of this, that Moxley was fucking with Punk because Punk had fucked with Hangman and said the things he'd said about never losing to Hangman. But yeah, I mean I suppose that's encouraging to kind of your take on this, that maybe it's feeling more likely he's gonna come back. If they've had contact, that's big news. If Punk is even, because that's the thing, I being a long-term CM Punk fan, I'll believe an apology when I see it, because it's CM Punk. I don't think that man's ever believed he was wrong in his life. This is a man who doesn't speak to his brother, 30 years later because he fucking, shorted him on some money for some fucking backyard wrestling show.
Yeah.
Like, that's CM Punk. Colt Cabana, there's, we know what CM Punk is like, and when he's like with grudges.
Unless you're young.
The fact that he's willing to even climb down a little bit tells you he must be serious about wanting to come back. The fact that he deleted that Instagram post, I suppose, tells you he must be serious about wanting to come back. But yeah, do you take much from that? I suppose it's more like round the sides details. Fightful have got there.
It is. It's much more around the sides detailed. In terms of the big stuff, there's going to be a fair few meetings and the rest of it. They've got to see how it goes with the rest of the locker room and everything else. It's just that I think sometimes the issue is, and this is always historically in wrestling, there has always been needle. Partly because where you were positioned in the card really determined how much you were being paid. So therefore, like moving up the ladder was very much like part of what you did. You were in it for yourself, like a proper independent contractor. When you're being salaried and you're within a system, you kind of you get the idea that it's a lot more harmonious. Like, yeah, there's much more bonuses and the rest if you are pushed, but at the same time, you're going to be earning guaranteed money. But
the issue.
what he adds is a genuine sense of needle. That's what he adds. Because I won't lie, what's my thought coming out of this? I kind of want to see Punk versus Moxley again. Which we saw it twice in succession, as we've mentioned earlier on. But I didn't think that would be. I'm like, okay, you get around to Punk and Hangman and the rest of it. It's convincing them. It's going, it's the Jerry Jarrett is mentioned there famously. He had like a sign on there. Was it personal issues draw money? That's what that was the fundamental part of his belief. In 2023, that is an incredibly difficult thing to pull off. 78, 80, fine, let the fuckers fight, and then they get their payoff regardless. A lot more difficult in 2023. But I thought when they had the moment on Dynamite and the rest of it with the like blurring out of the Punk on the bus, I just thought that isn't an accident. You don't need that shot. You don't need to tempt fate.
I think that I would lead. I'd take less from that just because I haven't been at the shows. I've seen like the state of some of these trucks. They just don't update them, and they're not that fucking organized. I think it's probably just, oh fuck, there's a truck there. I think if he was coming back, I would have not blocked it out. Like that would have been the take big fucking CM Punk face on TV. But I don't know. Maybe they're paying 3D chess, JP. Maybe there's something to that. But overall, I just fucking love it. He's like we said, keep saying, Punk is Punk. It makes life a lot more interesting when he's around and he's having these moments. He did calm down by the end of the night. He did post that he's too old for this shit with a Murtagh meme from Lethal Weapon. Yeah, allegedly. Jericho rose above it allegedly with his delete meme that he posted. Tony Khan's avoided posting anything. This is going to be massive for Tony Khan. Which way he goes, whether the allegation of Punk of them they're trying to get him to wrestle while he was injured, comes to anything. Whether there's any mudslinging from the other side, I don't know. I think that's the thing. I'm encouraged by the fact there's been meetings so far. I'm encouraged by, that side of things. But where CM Punk goes, this drama is going to follow. So, yeah, we'll see.
I don't even care if it draws money. It's good for me. And entertaining
TV it's entertaining
for me.
It's good podcast content. We'll have more of this.
Right, it's fucking content. I don't have an issue with it.
Go on.